Hello, Happy New Year, and welcome to the first Gaming the Podcast of 2022. My name is John Robertson, joined as ever by Stace Harmon, and today we're talking about our video game resolutions for the new year. What are our ambitions around video games for the next 12 months, and where do we want to be with games when 2023 kicks off? So, Stace, I know that we haven't swapped ideas yet. We don't know what each other's resolutions are. So, do you want to kick it off and surprise me?
Well, yeah, mine's... I don't know how much it's going to surprise you, but mine is pretty simple to begin with. I have, at its most basic level, my first resolution is to play more games. I don't think that will surprise you at all, but there's some more sort of specificity around that. So I want to play more games, but I also want to play more specifically, I want to play more kind of shorter PC games. Like a lot of people, I've got a whole load of games in my Steam library that have gone untouched. I picked them up in a sale, or they were part of the Humble Bundle, or whatever it might be, and I just haven't got around to playing them. So there's a load of games that I would like to play that I feel like they're games that are kind of have been a form of expression for somebody. So probably a small team, an indie team, maybe even a solo developer, but games like... Please Knock on My Door, or Before I Forget, or Heaven's Vault, or What Remains of Edith Finch. Like these, I guess, indie games typically, but games that have something at the heart of them beyond, I guess, a desire to entertain, which is a noble goal in and of itself. But I want to kind of dig into a lot more games that have something, I don't know, a message or a reason that they were created, or somebody was inspired to do so because of X, rather than just for the pure sort of game design principles. So I want to play a lot more games like that. A lot of those are on PC, and tied with that, I also want to share a lot more games with people. There's like, I know people that play games, friends
people
and family.
You know personally.
Yes, yeah, people that I know personally, because I know people that play or are interested in games or are interested in what games could be. And I know that there are games that I have in my head that I've played that would suit certain people that I know who may not own a console or, even a PC, but that I could, with a little bit of effort, either when they're here or I could take my console to somebody else's or whatever it is. But I'd like to kind of share, I suppose, what games are a bit more than I already do. It's sort of a bit of in my family, it's like, well, Stace plays a lot of games. Obviously, his job is a lot to do with games. And that's like, we don't really have a lot of conversations about that. But if somebody else is interested in films or football, or somebody says, oh, I read this amazing book the other day, that gets shared a lot more readily than I share games. And so I don't know there's probably a whole kind of load of reasons for that, or there's sort of a history behind that, but I'd like to just be, I suppose, a bit more outgoing with it and say, oh, I played this amazing game the other day that I think you'd get a lot out of, let me show it to you, or at least, here's a video of it, or whatever it is, just to kind of share it a bit more rather than it be this sort of more insular thing. There's a really nice, quite charmingly earnest bit in the film Don't Look Up that I watched very recently, in which Timothée Chalamet's character, towards the very end of the film, introduces himself to somebody. It doesn't really matter who, but introduces himself to somebody as, oh, hi, my name's X, and I'm I don't know what it is, like Fire Puma 142 on Twitch. Do you game? And it just seemed like it was like a really disarmingly charming way. I mean, I'm not going to start doing that, I don't think, because that would be, that's like, oh, I'm a avid golfer. Do you golf? As the first thing you say to somebody that you meet. But it was just, I found it really charming. It's like, that's a very heart on your sleeve kind of approach. So yeah, to sum up, I would like to play more games, but also share more games with, like friends and family around me.
So you want to say, hello, I'm Stace. Here's this really obscure game. Have you heard of it? No? Oh, okay.
Basically.
Try again until you get a hit.
Go down the local pub and just be like that with all the pub crowd. It's like, look, and here's a video of it. Oh no, but let me sit down at your table and show you this game. I just want to kind of share that a bit more and I suppose do a bit more to just kind of, I suppose, champion video games a bit more in the same way that, people, you and I talk about films, or mostly you talk to me about films because you watch 50 times the number of films as I do. And that's a nice thing to do. It's like, oh, I watched this really cool thing the other day. It was really interesting. It was about X, or I thought it was really touching, or it was really funny, whatever. And it's like games, I'd like to kind of just include games in that conversation and be a bit more outgoing with it, which isn't really my personality, to be honest. It's not really I don't really do that a lot with much that I'm kind of really interested in. So it requires a bit of personal growth.
The people that you know personally that you might talk about this sort of thing with, would they be open and receptive to hearing about it?
Yeah, I think certainly there's a handful of people that I know definitely would. Then there's kind of the people on the fringe of that who it might be a little bit more. I want to say the word uncomfortable, and I don't know. That's sort of a personal hang up. I think it needn't be uncomfortable. It just, it's that thing of, if somebody's passionate about something, then you can have a conversation with them about it, even if you know nothing about it personally. So there's people in that kind of sphere that I know don't play games, but I think would be interested. If you made it, oh, I watched this film the other day about X, they would be, oh, okay, that's really cool. I might check that out. If you say, I played this game the other day, there is a barrier to entry here, obviously, of, well, I don't have a console, or I don't have a PC, or I don't play games. How even do I buy a game these days? Because it's not often really that you walk into a shop and do that. So there is a barrier to entry thing, but that's not really, that's not really the point. Whether they decide to take it up themselves or not, it's like, I can share some of these ideals, or these like philosophies, or these principles that are put across in certain video games, without necessarily them needing to pick it up and play it themselves to see what it's all about. So so that's going to be kind of a little personal mission for 2022, is just sharing a bit more, which will also hopefully lead to kind of other conversations. I suppose perhaps that's just in a bid to be a bit more social. Perhaps that's what
I was going to say. It's a nice social one, using games as your delivery method for increasing social engagement, to put it scientifically.
Yeah, so that's going to be, that's me. Play and share more games.
Okay, so my first one, well, it's not really my first one, but one of mine, is, it's not really the opposite of that, but it's definitely less social.
Play less games.
Play less games and talk to people less about games. No, so mine is spends more time, not necessarily having made a game at the end, but certainly spend way more time every week, every day even, learning Unity, which I started off learning last year, but I kind of started learning it at a weird point, because I started learning it when our last book, 20 Double Fine Years, was kind of heating up on the production side. The writing had largely been finished, but then there was still a bunch of stuff to do after that. So I kind of dropped the ball on that. Well, I didn't drop the ball. I continued dabbling in it all the way, but I just want to be more disciplined and set a time every week, probably more than once a week. I don't know, 2 or 3 times a week, I guess, to be realistic. To really learn Unity. And I don't know, well, maybe I should just set the goal of just making a whole game. I mean, I have made games that are playable from start to finish, but they've just been text adventures, and they've been 10 minutes long. So they're not like game. They're just little demos. They're little practice demos. I mean, ultimately, like, I really want to make a horror game. I don't know exactly what, but I just want to create that sensation in players. I mean, I obviously could do that with a text adventure. But yeah, I don't know if setting the goal of making a horror game start to finish from scratch by myself as like a fast end of year project is necessarily realistic. But I mean, as I'm talking, maybe I could rope other people in to do like art and stuff. I mean, I know enough people that are capable in different areas and music and that. Potentially collaborate like that.
Is that for you does that come from, do you think, a desire to have a finished thing at the end of it, or is it the journey rather than the destination? Is it like, does that tie into gaining a deeper understanding of how games are made? Is it just to have a new skill set? So can
Well,
you identify the driving factor?
Well, I think it's all of that. I mean, I love learning new stuff anyway, and certainly new areas of creative expression. I'm always interested in. I mean, I learned to play loads of instruments when I was a kid. I do photography now. I love, making books, obviously. So it's like making stuff, but also I like learning stuff and just having that, like I always talk about this, have this like foundational level knowledge of lots of things.
Yeah.
So you really understand the building blocks of how things are basically made. And then from there, you can then go and make your own things. You don't need to know the latest innovation in X thing. Elon Musk talks about that. Like he doesn't need to know, him personally, he doesn't need to know the latest science of rocket technology. He just needs to know basically how rocket works, and then he can dream as to what's possible with that core fundamental knowledge. It's someone else, some other person with the more detailed knowledge, so that can make the more modern things happen.
And arguably only having, I say only in the context of versus an expert, but only having a foundation knowledge in something can free you up to dream more, can't it? Because then you're not, your brain isn't automatically reining you in and saying, no, that's not possible. That wouldn't. And it's like, well, if you don't know that, then maybe you can just dream and then be like, well, maybe there's a way around it. Maybe there's a creative solution. Well, yeah,
because I suppose if you only know the alphabet, then you can dream about what words are and can be used for. But if you know English to its nth degree already, then you can only really, well, not only, but it's harder to not just simply add the next bit to that rather than run something in parallel to that.
Yeah, and I've got a very specific, quick personal anecdote to do with exactly that. That my kids are 6 and 4, and my 4-year-old has taken to. She knows the alphabet, so now she will just randomly say, "What does T X Z Q H spell?" And one answer to that is say, "Well, it doesn't spell anything because that's not a word." But interesting and more, tell me what it means. A more interesting way of dealing with that is to just sound it out, because that's ultimately what she's doing. She's like putting letters together to see what they sound like, and taking foundational building blocks and making a bigger component or composite thing out of them. So and that's fun and interesting in and of itself. And that's how like worlds are created in something like D&D. You just start with a little seed of something, and it's like, well, maybe that then adds to this, and that sits on top of this. I think it certainly is I can imagine would be a rewarding thing in and of itself, irrespective. And I think this is a bugbear of mine. Like, it doesn't, even if there isn't an end result, as in a fully playable game that you can show to people or put out there, it's like that doesn't, obviously it should be obvious. It obviously doesn't mean it wasn't worthwhile. Like, there's a whole
no, of course not,
thing in the process of doing that. So
yeah, for sure. I mean, I want it all though. I want the journey and I want the result.
Well, of course you do.
I want the end. I do want to make something.
Yes. Yeah.
Do want to
fair enough.
Finish something. Yeah. Finish something.
Yeah.
But
I can imagine conversations like that would be around that. If you tell that to people, which is literally what you're doing right now, but if you say that to people around you, it becomes that question of, oh, how's your game going? How's that game that you're making going, as a shorthand? And it's a bit like, it's common to how people, it's just common parlance, but really it's shorthand for how is your experience of learning to code going, or to learning to use Unity going. But it just becomes about the end result. How is that game going? And it's like, well, the game itself isn't really going anywhere, but that's not.
Yeah, but I learned how to do it ABC.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's me then. So I'd have probably failed at that by June, and I wouldn't have done a single hour learning.
Well, I would, quickly to circle back, I would say that a lot of my Play More PC games I am looking to the Steam Deck as being a really key component in that for me, because of just lifestyle, the way that my house is set up, and it's just easier for me to play PC games handheld as and when I can do that. But that's not coming out until a while. I think mine's not due until at least Q2, if not beyond. So, but we'll see. Nonetheless, I don't want to just sit on that and wait until I get Steam Deck. I'll find other solutions. But yeah, this is where we have these resolutions, right? Just to try and have something to aim at, even if we don't quite get there.
Okay. So what's your second thing to aim at then?
Okay, well, so some of my other ones are more achievement based. A bit like perhaps the Unity, but they are more, here's a firm sort of result. So one of those is I want to dedicate some time to speed running something. And it's going to have to be, because of the nature of that discipline, something that I already am hugely interested in and happy to play. Of course, you play it in a very different way when you speedrun it. But I'm thinking something like Hades, or something like the Left Behind DLC for The Last of Us, because you can speedrun that in something ridiculous like 5 minutes if you are, world class, a world class speedrunner. But it's not something that you need to spend tens of hours. You'll spend tens of hours perfecting it, of course, no doubt, but you don't need to spend tens of hours just on an initial playthrough of like The Last of Us Part 2, for example. I'm not going to do that. Yeah. Something like Left Behind, which is like just manageable. It's like you're going to spend 2 hours on your first try just to get through it, perhaps, and then you go from there.
Yeah. Are you adding any bells and whistles to that? Is it like, is like any percentage, no glitches, any place, no damage, like whatever?
I think probably the easiest place for me to start would be like a no glitch run. So but I am interested in doing the glitch side of it as well, because that is learning the game in an entirely different way. That's like deconstructing it and learning the boundaries of it. And that's the kind of thing that I have enjoyed watching, where like, particularly with developers of a game reacting to other people doing that. And it's that thing of the speedrunner is kind of using or is taking advantage of certain constraints that we use during the game's creation to find loopholes in, well, if you move in this particular way, you can clip through this wall, which then falls you through the level, and then you have to sort of adjust your positioning, and you'll end up ultimately landing here. And it kind of points to how the game is put together almost as a geographical place. It's just that the bits in between aren't filled in. And it's just like, well, actually, this, as far as the game's concerned, this area B sits below area A, but you need to know how to get there without going through the sort of standard corridor or the standard setup that the game lays out for you. So I would like to explore that. But I think as a person who's, the extent of my speedrunning has been playing Hades and getting like a sub 20-minute run. So that's kind of the level that despite the hundreds of hours I've put into Hades, I've never played it or never focused in playing it in that way. And I think the last time I looked, like the record for Hades was something like 5 minutes, which I just don't even understand that. But I like that about it. I like that I don't understand that. And that's what I'm interested in kind of digging into to understand. It's like, how is that possible? Because I think that 5 minute run is like, that is glitchless. So that is just playing the game and having such a such a in-depth understanding of how the game is constructed and the optimal decisions to make, that you can get through that game in a quarter of the time of my best current run. So yeah, I want to do that. And I'm not sure what that game is yet, as I say. And I think I can imagine probably streaming it in some way, or at least making some videos about it just to explore the process. But yeah, I would like to, certainly by the end of the year, if not before that, have something resembling I don't know that it will be competitive in terms of the world of speedrunning, but something that is far more competitive versus what I've got now. As I say, I've got like a 20-minute Hades run. So if I can cut that down to, 10 minutes, which is nowhere near the record, but it's like, that would be amazing for me to do that, to shave off half the time. Then yeah, that's something I'd like to explore and just kind of dip my toe into. And yeah, so watch this space, I suppose. Game to be decided, but I think maybe streaming it in some way, shape, or form would be interesting. Bring the community into it, kind of thing.
Yeah, like my speedrunning diary with Stace Harmon.
Yeah,
my speedrunning journey.
Yeah, and then you get a load of tips from people that know far better than you do about, like, well, immediately you're doing that wrong. Okay, well, cool. That's a learning process. So yeah. That's we'll see that progresses, but that we'll fold it in, I think, in some way to perhaps the videos that we put out on YouTube. So yeah, watch this space. Speedrunning.
Yeah, I mean, my second resolution isn't that, but it's not. Well, it's dissimilar, but it's kind of linked. sometimes play more games on higher difficulties rather than just opting for normal. I've played a bunch more of what would be considered more difficult games this year. Like I've played a couple of From Software games, one of which I'd already played before. Doom Eternal DLC, GTFO. And when I was thinking about resolutions to talk about here or to make for myself, I think just plumping for medium, because like normal / medium, whatever, average difficulty on games, on a lot of games, really I'm thinking about shooter and action games here. The ones that would typically come with a difficulty level attached to them. Like, it's no secret that normal has become a lot easier in the past decade or so. It was happening on the PS3, but certainly on PS4 onwards, normal has become, much easier than it used to be. And I do find myself sometimes on certain games, after like the learning period is done and the game's taught you its sort of foundation tricks and interactions that you have to make with it, sometimes it just does feel like you're going through the motions, or you're just being like a bit of a tourist in the game, and you're just going through it to look at the nice scenery or the nice graphics or to take in the narrative. And that's fine. Like I love taking in the narrative from like anyone else does. And indeed, that's probably my favorite element of a lot of games, but there's no reason why you can't have that in unison with a higher difficulty level. And I know sometimes it can be difficult, because if you die too much, then it kind of ruins the narrative and it becomes all disjointed. But I don't think that that's enough of a negative to dive into enjoying games in a way that is more challenging, because the reward that you get obviously from completing a game that you play on a high difficulty, or a game that is just innately more difficult, is very different to a game that is easier. And I think maybe on action and single player shooters, I've maybe slipped more into the path of least resistance a lot of time, just to sort of see the game as it was.
I know what you mean.
Rather than really have to really understand the game mechanically on a much deeper level in order to progress and really feel and play the story of the game in that way, rather than just have it like told to you through more kind of cinematic or through techniques taken from other mediums. Anyway, like the interaction and the gameplay is the bit that games have that other popular forms of entertainment don't have. And so, playing that bit of the game on a higher difficulty is a very different experience and offers something that nothing else can.
Absolutely. And I think that can be a completely different thread of engagement. Yes, the narrative side for it, like a single player adventure game, let's pick a random game like, I don't know, The Last of Us. The narrative side is one thing. What you're doing is another. And I think for me, like a game like that, I do now always just put on hard out of the gates, because there is a part of my brain kind of lights up with how that fits thematically, that the way that they adjust difficulty in a lot of games is, you deal less damage and you take more damage. But in a game with resources like The Last of Us, they become more scarce as well. And then that feeds more directly into my image of the world, that if I don't have a glut of resources on hand all the time to make a smoke bomb or a, Molotov or whatever, then it forces me to be a bit more creative. And I enjoy that. I like that. Yeah, I mean, yes, there are spikes, and that does become problematic, typically with bosses or in areas with a lot of enemies, and it can be frustrating. And that's I guess difficulty hopefully will become more dynamic as as video games mature further, that it won't just be, medium or hard or easy. It will be more of a sort of a dynamic curve or adjustment to how you're playing in the background, without a pop-up screen needing to say, oh, you've died 5 times, do you want to put it on medium or easy or whatever. But yes, that different thread of engagement is definitely, for some games, is definitely a thing. I think the Batman games I played, Arkham games I played on hard as well, for the same reason. It's like, well, what else is there? Okay, so this isn't working. This pattern that I've got into of attacks, say, for the Arkham games, isn't working against this enemy or these groups of enemies. So what else do I have in my arsenal? And it's like, it just pushes me a bit more to see, just experiment a bit more and see what else is out there rather than just the same combination of attacks all the time, I guess.
It can be harder as well to make a game that's harder, right? Like, and also make the game feel. I'm talking about specifically about games that have different difficulty levels here, not just harder games that are set difficulty. Because on something like Resident Evil, say, or something with a boss or bosses as a concept, like how does the game design? Like, it's no easy trick to give you, like, you're going into a boss and you don't have enough resources, so the game's going to have to give you resources, otherwise you literally cannot kill the boss. You literally can't do enough damage of it to it because you don't have the right ammo or the right weapons or whatever. So the game needs to give you those somehow before you enter the fight. But how do you do that in a way that doesn't just kill your sense of your suspension of disbelief, and it feels right for the world? Because we've all played those things where it's like, and now you go into a little room and there's just loads of ammo everywhere, and then you look out the window and there's a large circular arena, and it's like, oh, okay, what's happening? So that's a bit crude, but you only really see how designers have intelligently solved that problem if you play the game like that. Otherwise, you don't see that. You don't see how they've solved that problem. So it's not just a sense of achievement for myself that I'm interested in it to to overcome this thing and conquer them. It's to see more examples of how designers are overcoming that quite difficult problem that can be very jarring.
I do like the idea of something that is differently designed. I know one of the Tomb Raider games a couple of years ago, I don't know if it was Rise, I think it might have been Shadow of the Tomb Raider, had multiple difficulty levels for different areas of the game. So combat, you could change, it was multiple sliders basically. So like traversal, you could put it on hard and that would take away all of the telltale signs of however they did it, and combat, you could put it on, but you could put combat down to easy if you wanted to. And that's part of the way there for me. Like that idea of choose where you want your challenge, I think is interesting. And obviously you can only do that if the game has those kinds of pillars built into it. With a Resident Evil game, I like that like doing a boss fight, which is often the sticky bit, but having something like, I don't know, on normal, the resources are just scattered around this arena that we're talking about, but on hard, it's like mini enemies spawn, or just regular, not mini enemies, little tiny enemies running around, but regular enemies spawn that will drop those resources, but you have to beat them first. So it's like, but it's still making you work for it. That requires a different, that requires kind of a different scenario, like something has been added to the game that isn't there on a different difficulty, which, it can be labor or resource intensive to do that, because most people are going to play it on medium anyway, so are we really going to spend time programming and then testing and then all the rest of it on a higher difficulty? But it would be a more elegant solution than just, this hits harder and now you just have to be better. That's not the most. I'm thinking like there could be other ways of doing it as well. Like the boss itself could like smash up the environment as it goes, and then items could pop out of that smashed up environment, and that might happen on easy as well, or on easier difficulties, but on easier difficulties you also get all the ammo up front or something like that. Like a boss's pathfinding could be more intelligent, and so you have to lure them into those spaces, whereas on easy they just smash around and do whatever. So I mean, there may be an actual separate episode here on difficulty in games. I think it could be an interesting thing where we do look at what already exists and then perhaps hypothesize about how it could also work. But anyway, but that's your resolution, is to play games on a higher difficulty. And I mean the actual, to see how the game is designed on a higher difficulty, not just artificially make it more difficult for myself, like don't use a shotgun or whatever. Nothing, not that. Okay, cool. All right. So my two remaining are both game specific. Okay, one of mine is game specific and one of mine is like a type of game specific. Okay, what's the type of game specific? Because I'm interested to know if it's what I think it is. So, I don't think it will be what you think it is. So mine says to play more games that are made in black and white. Oh, okay. No, no, it wasn't
Um,
that. I thought you were going to say something about like maybe MOBAs or something, something like that. Because you've kind of touched on that in the past.
yeah, I do
More
want to
games
play
that are made
MOBA.
in black and white. That's
Yeah. So, well, this is interesting. This goes back to the photography thing that I mentioned. So,
mm,
when I go out taking photos, I will obviously know. Well, if I'm using a film camera, I'm locked into black or white from when the film goes in. On digital camera, you can choose, but
mm,
I will typically go out with black and white in mind or with color in mind, because what you create and how you go about creating it is completely different. Like without the
mhm.
color, like black and white is all about shape and contrast. Color is color. Um, so the
So the
feeling.
decision to what pictures you take changes
Oh yeah,
as
yeah.
to
Because the
what.
way,
Yeah.
yeah, different things look good in black and white. Like you wouldn't
Hmm.
take a picture of like a colorful, I don't know, quilt or something in black and
Sure.
white, unless the
Yeah.
shapes were really interesting.
Yeah.
Um, so the feeling, what you look for when you create it, is different, but also the feeling that you get when you look at it is completely different as well. Like your
Mm,
mind just reacts very differently to something that's black and white and something that's color. You look for different things. You're excited by different things. You miss different things.
mm,
So seeing how more game developers are using that visual elements, and potentially tying it into gameplay and interactions, and how that makes you potentially feel different, even if everything's the same, I suppose, even if all the interactions and mechanics are the same, but it's in black and white versus this. Like, how do you look at the game differently? What are you looking for? What are you taking in?
mm.
What emotions are different? So, I mean, there's been a bunch. There's a lot of black and white games. I mean, I've played some of them, like Limbo and Inside are largely black and white. They're probably the most famous ones, I guess. World of Horror, I played a bunch of last year, which is very good, but I haven't played Toem, West of Loathing,
Mm.
Return of the Obra Dinn, which I know is not black and white, but it's like monochromatic largely.
Yeah.
Genesis Noir. So there are a bunch of games that um, fall into
Yeah,
that
and so I
category.
can see. Yeah, in fact, those three you reeled off were the three that were in my head: West of Loathing, Return of the Obra Dinn, and Toem. I've played all three of those, and they are very different. They create a very different tone, of course, just because of that's what they set out to do. But something specifically like Toem, I do find kind of stokes my imagination more, I think, than it would if it were in color, because it's, I suppose, a bit like it's closer to reading words on a page and creating the pictures. When I look at Toem, it's black and white, but I almost don't see it in black and white. I kind of, or certain bits of it, I don't at least. If I see a particular character or somebody's wearing a certain thing, or I take a particular photo, I kind of, my mind fills in the colors in that or
Mm.
certain parts of it. And that's an interesting thing. It's much more open to interpretation than if it were in color. It
Yeah.
would be a very different thing. It would
Well, and
just,
it's much more individual as well, because it's
mm,
interesting to think about that. And from like the arty perspective, everyone is presumably the bit that their mind fills in. It's just like with what conceptual art is, isn't it? The artist makes 3/4 of the
mm-hmm,
circle, the viewer, the audience fills in the rest, but everyone's filling in of the circle is going to be slightly different. So
mm-hmm,
in effect, the art has created however many responses. The
yeah,
art has been replicated that many times over that many responses, and the art is that many different things to that
mm,
many different people. Some people would say that means it's worthless, because it doesn't have an objective truth. But I tend not to believe that. I believe more sort of postmodernism, I suppose, that it can be different things to different people.
mm.
Um, so yeah, play more black and white games, and
I wonder if that could also feed into the Unity resolution as well, because it might open you up to
it'll
think,
make it
well,
easier for me, wouldn't it? Well,
yeah,
or
I'll
harder,
do
or
this in
harder.
black and white. Well, this is what that would give me, I suppose. This is the benefit of that. I can imagine playing with kind of the contrast in a black and white horror game in a way that could create some quite unsettling things, is where my mind
Yeah.
goes.
Well, without the color, you'd have to have, just like in photography, shape and contrast would be way more important, but also movement would be much more important, because
Mm-hmm.
you can't have things like HUD elements or call outs or things where the player needs to very quickly see information. You can't use splashes of color to generate that link to like an important element or an alert sign or an emergency or something. So you'd have to quite intelligently use shape, contrast, and movement within a black and white image to create that. It's quite interesting.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I guess that's another kind of almost a diary type thing that can be kept, isn't it? That in the newsletter that we put out every month, we have a little like what we've been playing section. So I'd be interested to see if more of these kinds of games crop up in that. So okay. So yeah, that wasn't at all.
No, I didn't think that many people were going to guess that.
It would be quite random if I was like, yeah, that's exactly what I thought you were going to say. Okay, so one of my last ones then is this one's a pretty quick one. I've been replaying, or I've gone back to Returnal recently after it was picked as my game of the year for last year. And I'm going to achieve the platinum trophy for that, which is not a thing that I normally aim at. I don't even know. I've probably got a small handful of platinum trophies in all the games that I've played on PlayStation. But Returnal is one of those that I do like the idea of using trophies as a different way of playing the game. So I've played that game a lot, and I've kind of seen all of the end game stuff and the finished Act 3, which is its own thing. You have to jump through multiple hoops to get to that. And I've just got these kind of survey bits left to do where you go into each biome and you have to find all of the glyphs and all of the audio logs. And there's an RNG element to that because they don't always spawn, which I can imagine would perhaps become quite frustrating. But because of the way that game structure works, after you've completed it a couple of times, you can jump pretty quickly into specific biomes. So, but it's the looking at the trophy list, not just in terms of the number of trophies, but also in terms of what those trophies are asking you to do, and then playing the game in a way that might be slightly different to how I've played it up until that point, because I'm not thinking of trophies which are like, oh, kill 10 of these, or, upgrade all of these weapons. And that's kind of a thing that tends to just happen as you're playing the game. I'm thinking kind of more specific things which are almost like challenges, I suppose, set by the developers to show, there's like those trophies that are just implemented because they have to be, which are those just upgrade every weapon or do X, Y, and Z. And then there are those ones that are like, achieve this very specific thing that you have to set out to do. And that's what I'm interested in. So yeah, platinum, whatever, getting the platinum trophy on Returnal. I think I'm 4 trophies away from that. So I'll see how long that ends up taking and whether that
you've done that by the next episode.
Opinion. Well, maybe whether it affects my opinion of the game. It might be that thing of you start digging deeper and it becomes a chore. So yeah, we'll see. But that's a sort of a quick and easy one. Is the platinum Returnal. There's a very small number of, I think 2% of players have done that. So that's it's not an easy thing to do, obviously. But yeah, okay. That's going to be.
You want to be part of the 2% of Returnal?
Yeah.
2% club
when I get there. Yeah.
Okay. Well, my final one is pretty straightforward as well, and it's to win just one race on iRacing. Just one race. that'll be fine. My highest position is third. My highest finish is third. So I've had it. How long have I had iRacing? Like 11 months. I've been playing iRacing, but I've only really been playing it like serious weekly, taking part in the seasons. Seriously for the last 2 seasons plus the current one. And just briefly, for those that don't know, I mean, a lot of people know that iRacing isn't just another Forza or Gran Turismo or whatever, where winning a race is just part and parcel. A lot of people in the iRacing community would even be upset that I'm mentioning it on this podcast because they would call it. They would say it's not a game; it's a pure simulator. There's no video game element involved.
So, what do you think is going to be required? What sort of regime? What sort of workload? What sort of what's going to be required for you to win?
Yeah,
to win a race.
Yeah, I mean, well, hopefully I just get lucky and everyone in the race is rubbish and I just cruise to victory.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that is the potential. Yeah, sometimes there's a lot of carnage on turn 1 of the first lap. I mean, what's going to be required, I suppose, is just hard graft, just more hours in testing in the same car on the same track. So, look ahead on the racing calendar, pick a race where you know that week you're not going to be distracted. You've got a lot of time you can dedicate to just putting the hours in, putting the laps in practice, and then translating that into race pace. I mean, the problem is that all the races so far that I've ever raced in there's always been 1, 2, 3 people in there who are just phenomenal. And the issue is, that they're very good, but also, I've only been playing it for a year, just under, and that's not very long in iRacing terms, because you're often in racing series. In almost all of them, there will be people who have been racing that specific car or those sets of cars, or one of the legal cars to use. They would have been racing that specific car for a couple of years, 4 years, a long time. So they're at a starting point that is just well beyond my ability with that car. So that's not an excuse. That's the reason more than an excuse. I mean, the way you get over that is by putting the hours in. And being better than them. So, I mean, it's definitely possible.
Can you do all of that in the game, do you think? By which I mean, does it require information or knowledge that you would gain from the community, from forums? Like, is it a question of, I can do this if I do it over and over and over again? Like, all of the information I need is in the game or the simulation. I need to, I know that if I take that corner, I've just lost 1/10 of a second and that kind of thing. Or is there like...
Well, yes, yeah, you could, but it would take more time than learning from other people's mistakes and failures. Mistakes and successes. Because if you think about it in normal, in real, I don't want to annoy the community, but in like physical on track racing, iRacing is real racing, but you know what I mean. In real racing, the teams are all learning from each other's mistakes. They're all looking at all the telemetry from the other teams. They're looking at how they're taking corners differently. They're doing so. Yeah, like you learn by, education is the sharing of the experiences of people that came before you, basically.
Yeah.
So, whereas street smarts is just like learning on the job, right? Or like doing your own thing. So a mixture of those two is the best. You want to have your own approach that works for you and the things that you're naturally good at, and the way that you like to drive, that suits your driving style. But you also want to take in ideas that other people have got that you haven't, because I think otherwise it's quite arrogant almost to feel like, oh well, no, I will just come in now and with no communication with no knowledge of other people's approaches or ideas, I will dominate this and make the best thing happen that they've ever seen. You might do that, but surely even if you are doing that, even if you are taking that approach, it's still better to know what everyone else is doing. If only so that you know your opponents better for like when you're racing them. But there's a lot of things you can take on that would help you be better.
Yeah, and I think that feeds back into like the speed running thing. It would be ludicrous for me to sit down and then it's like, I guess, trying to reinvent the wheel. It's like there's a lot of stuff here, particularly for a glitched kind of run where you're allowed to you're allowed to exploit parts of the game. So, well, I might as well go and find out what those exploits are before trying to find them all again personally.
It's like you don't become the greatest boxer of all time by never studying the current greatest boxers of all time.
Yeah. And so do you think, as a final thing on that from me, because it ties into my last short one, but do you think that you already have, like, is it a refinement of what you're already doing, or do you think there's stuff about the way that you play or drive that needs looking at? Does that make sense? Like, is there an identifiable thing where it's like, this, I need to like actually change the way that my brain works with this particular aspect of the game?
Yeah, I know what the problem is. So consistency of lap time is the problem. So my single lap pace is pretty decent. Like I qualify well, and individual laps I put in are, competitive, but it's getting the consistency, and it's specifically, I think, consistency. And when I'm approaching other cars, being more patient and overtaking, and that's not that I'm crashing other cars off the track. It's that I will just brake too late when I'm not close enough to them, and then my line, and then I won't be able to, and I won't overtake them. But my line through that corner is bad, which messes up the next 2 corners. So I've lost 3 corners worth of time on this against this person that I am at my better lap times, definitely faster than, but I can't overtake them because I'm, always just lunging in like a lap too early or something. I need to be that tiny bit closer. So it's that. It's consistency of lap time, and often that inconsistency of lap time is caused by poor decision making when it comes to overtaking.
Okay. Well, that does feed in. Okay, so win a single race on iRacing is your next resolution, and then my final one. Some of that feeds into my final one, which is to reach Diamond League in Hearthstone. Now there is a level above that, which is Legend, but I'm trying to be somewhat realistic. Even this is a big stretch for me. Despite the many hundreds of hours that I've played Hearthstone for, I have only ever got to kind of like mid-gold range as it is in the current league system. Above gold is platinum, 10 ranks of platinum, and then above platinum is legend. So I've got a long way to go. And this is why I'm asking that question, because for me to do that, I think it will require quite a fundamental change in my decision making and the way that I play Hearthstone, because I do play it as there's a risk acceptance or a risk assessment or like a gambling element even in the way that I play Hearthstone, that I might hold on to this card because I'm waiting for this card to come up, because if I can play those two in tandem, that's going to be much better. And so that needs to change. Like it's almost like I suppose a training of your mind when you're playing poker. It's like you need to play what's in front of you and what's happening, not, like, oh, I'm just going to hope that I draw another ace. So
the roads to a pro poker player, one line, just hopefully you draw an ace.
Hopefully you draw an ace. So I'm going to give this a try. I think it will require, this is the one of all of these that I may fall off the easiest, because I've been playing Hearthstone for so long that it may be that it requires such a rewiring that I may not enjoy playing Hearthstone in that way. But I know that through my sort of just day-to-day normal play, I am not able or capable of reaching those heights because I never have. Some of that can be just an hours thing. If you need to put in a lot of time to kind of move up the ranks. The lap time thing for you is interesting in the way that translates to this, because you need to put a consistent run together. Because if you put runs together, you earn bonus stars, which moves you up the positions faster. And you need a minimum of 3 wins in a row to get that. So I think if I'm forever winning just 2 games, getting a single star each time, then losing the 3rd game and that resets the counter, everything takes a lot longer. So that consistency is what I need as well. Like a single game, sure, I'll go up against somebody and I will fancy my chances, but in a consistent, like putting together a run of 3, 4, 5, 6, 10 games in a row is where I need to be kind of making different decisions in order to achieve this. And
then I guess the same question that you asked me, is it a case of looking at other higher level players and seeing what they do, learning from them, or is it do you know what the holes are in your strategy?
I know what the holes are in terms of the way that I play. I know that sometimes I make suboptimal decisions because I find that more fun for when it does pay off. The level of consistency that's required, I'll watch. What I've thought about doing is watching. There's a couple of Hearthstone streamers that I gravitate towards. Is watching one of their games and just doing quite a painstaking, like pausing it each turn and thinking, well, what would I do? Because you can see all of their cards, obviously, you can see the board. What would I do? And then seeing what they do, and then understanding why they've done that, or even assessing what would I normally do. But what do I think I should do? And does that match up with what they do? And so, there's like an education element and a retraining element required for me to achieve this. And you have to do it. The thing with this is you have to do it in a month. So it sounds like I've got all year to do it, but you don't, because each month your rank resets. Although it doesn't reset all the way, depending on how the higher you've got, the the less brutal the reset is. You know, you don't go down as far, you earn more bonus stars, etc. But it's a thing that has to be achieved in a sort of a 31 day period. Otherwise you're going to be kind of chasing your tail again. So I may need to sort of similarly pick a month where I know that I can, you know, I'm trying to do that rather than also trying to speed run something, and go for it that way. But yeah, that's my last one, is to reach Diamond League in Hearthstone, which a lot of people listening to this would just be like, I do that every single month, you know, consistently. But hey, yeah, that's my personal challenge for 2022.
All right, well, those are our gaming resolutions for 2022. We'd love to hear what yours are and what your response to ours is. We are on Twitter at Indie by Design. We are at Indie by Design on all social media platforms, and you can also check out the books that we make at indiebydesign.net. Otherwise, it's great to be back for 2022, and we will see you again on the next episode.